Hi everyone and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to talk about my adventures for the Invisible Cities project, and I'm going to talk about Mexico and Libya. I'm going to start with Mexico, and the book that I read was Tell Me How It Ends by Valeria Luiseli. I hesitated between reading either this one because it's a short non-fiction, a essay-y kind of thing, and The Lost Children Archive. Both seem to be about the same topic, which is the topic of children that cross the border between Mexico and the US and how they are lost in the system. But I ended up choosing this non-fiction because I believed it would give me a little bit more information, a little bit more context. So it was a short listen. I listened to it on audio. It was just about 4 hours, and it's a book in which Valeria Luiseli talks about her experience becoming a translator for the children who have crossed the border between Mexico and the US. They are not necessarily children from Mexico. They can also be from Honduras or Guatemala or any country in that region of the world. And it was quite a jarring experience to hear about what it's like being a refugee in that area and why the children are refugees. Apparently there's been a bump, if I can say, in the number of children that have been fleeing over to the US and the things they know that they're going to face. And so they flee mostly because of the drugs problem in their countries and how that drug problem is mostly fed by the US. It talks about what happens to them on their way, especially for young girls being raped. It talks about how many children and other people also die on their way over and there being mass graves. The experience them when they have crossed the border, that they kind of know what they have to do. And that they're put in, I'm going to call them prison-y kind of things, not necessarily, but in places with just a bunch of other children to wait until they are treated by the system. It was very interesting, and I liked also hearing about Valeria Luiseli's experience doing other things beside it. She kind of set up a group of students to talk about this problem, to students in the US at university that just went to a class to speak Spanish, and what happens to those students and how they became aware of this problem. It was a very interesting book, and if you get the opportunity to read it, I definitely read it because it's a problem that isn't really talked about, especially where I'm from in Europe. This is not a thing. We have our own refugees that we don't even know how to treat, and it's jarring how dehumanizing the experience is, knowing especially that this then is about children. So yeah, I definitely recommend it. So let's talk about the movie. I tried to look for something a little bit more lighthearted, and I ended up watching with my boyfriend Sonora, a movie on Netflix, and it's about a very eclectic group of people that want to cross a desert in order to go from a city in Mexico to one just on the border with California. And in this very eclectic group, there is a lot of racism because at the time, so there is I think it's a mine that was closed off for Mexicans at the time, and because the Mexicans weren't allowed to work in that mine anymore, you see that there's tension in the city that they used to live, and some of that tension is then channeled through to the Chinese community. So the Mexicans were angry at being seen as inferior by the people from the US, but then at their turn they were treating the Chinese as being inferior and being very racist and denigrating towards them. So in this group of very eclectic people, there is a half Chinese family, but there's also a man that is reading Mein Kampf and is very much into the whole Nazi thing, and there's certain things in between. There's also two guys that are smugglers, alcohol smugglers to the US, and as they cross this desert, there's a lot of tension because of the being very close together, the promiscuity. You're crossing a desert, there's going to be issues, but the issues, they're kind of in your face, slap kind of racist things that you're in shock of how people can be so mean. So it's very obvious racism. But at the same time, there's this kind of lightness to it that it's, I don't know, there's this character that he's a descendant from the tribe that did a lot of things in the desert, and he's an alcoholic, because we know that alcohol has been used a lot to make sure that tribes, local tribes, were not able to fight, to defend themselves, because they were so dependent on the alcohol that was given them to them. And he brings somehow a little bit of humor, I would say, to the, he has awesome facial expressions. So yeah, it was an interesting movie. It was good. It was kind of Disney kind of violence sometimes. I mean, we do see people dying, but there's no blood involved. You see a body that has been dead for a couple of days, and there's no rotting, there's no nothing. So it was just the kind of headspace that I needed. And when it comes to food, so now I'm trying to dial down my food, making it easier for myself, I could say, make sure that it's things that I can actually make and not make things that are too complicated. And we actually eat burritos every week. Monday is our burrito day, we call them wraps. So this time I made Mexican wraps, and I did add some things. Usually we don't make guacamole with it, and now I did add some guacamole, and I tried to make the sauce also a little bit more with the spices that we have. Normally we have a little sachet which has the spices included, and I did that myself. So they were our normal wraps, but then upgraded, and it was very nice. But we still ate them on Monday, because Monday is the day we eat the burritos. So that was very good. And that concludes the Mexico part, I think. And then I went to Libya. Now, first of all, I realized I know Libya and Lebanon are two very different countries, and I know that they're on different places, but I wasn't aware of their names being so similar. And especially when you're then talking about food that is from those places, or people that are from those. I mean, I know Libya and Lebanon, but then when I talk about food, I found myself saying Lebanese food instead of Libyan, and that's how I recognized that somehow the words being the same. I just recognized that my head was doing weird things. Anyway, do you have the same things? Sometimes there are words that oh, these are two different things. Oh. And that kind of happened with this one. But as for book, I read The Return by Hisham Matar, and I read it in Dutch, and then it's translated as De Terugkeer, which means exactly the same. And it was translated by Manik Sarkar, so from English to Dutch. So this is the memoir, I would say, of a certain part of Hisham Matar's life. Hisham Matar, when he was a young boy, his family had to flee Libya because his father was a political exile. He was vocally against the Gaddafi government, and therefore they had to go to Egypt. And then when Hisham Matar and his brother were somewhat older, they went to the UK, and I believe he's now a UK citizen as well. But so he goes back to Libya after some 33 years or something like that. And one of the reasons that he's returning is because he wants to find out what happens to his father. Some 10-20 years before, his father was kidnapped. So again, because he was vocally against the Gaddafi government. And except for a few letters that they got from when he was in prison, they never heard anything. So for 20 years they didn't hear anything about their father, and he's going back to Libya to try to find out something, anything. And he hasn't, it's not the first time that he's looking for information about his father, and throughout the book he talks about all of the effort that he did throughout the years trying to put pressure on the UK government to use these relationships that they have with the Gaddafi government, because they have that, and they're saying that, oh yeah, we trade with them, but it's a way to try to get them to be, I don't know, doing other things more humanely, but in practice that is not really what happened. So we hear about, in this book, Hisham's upbringing with his father, without his father, the impact of not having your father, because I think Hisham was about 20 when his father was kidnapped. He talks about the Gaddafi government. He talks about going back to Libya after all those years. And those parts were the parts that I really liked, seeing how close the family was. He has a huge family with a lot of nephews and uncles. We don't hear a lot about the female characters, just a little bit about his mother. Characters, they're people. But I love seeing how even if when he came back after 30 years that he's embraced by the whole family and they talk about things. And I love that these families are so close-knit that he fights a lot for two uncles and two nephews that have been imprisoned for about 20 to 30 years. And he hasn't even met these people, but he's doing stuff. And I love this bond. I thought that was very impressive. It took me a while, to be honest, to get into this book. You have to take your time a little bit with it and really appreciate because it has an eclectic kind of chronology. He jumps back and forth in time in a way that wasn't always easy to follow when, like me, I pick up a book whenever. So sometimes I think this is a book that works best if you sit down for longer periods of time, and that's not necessarily how I read. But when I was halfway through, I started taking a little bit more time when I was reading and just, I don't know, catching the slower boat. And then I really appreciated the writing as well. And yeah, it's a beautiful book. The only thing that I missed is, I know Libya now is still a mess, and he alludes to that a little bit in the second half of the book when he sees his family, and this is after the fall of Gaddafi, and he's like, oh yeah, we didn't know then that this and this and this would happen, and I wish I had known more about that as well, but somehow I'm too lazy to find that out. Maybe I should watch a documentary or so about this. Oh yeah, talking about documentary, I'm filming this, but I haven't even watched a movie or anything yet for Libya. We made the food yesterday. So I made tabahish yesterday, which is a very easy, very good meal with potatoes, eggplants, zucchini, tomato sauce, and chili. And there was also another spice that I couldn't find, but for me this was the meal. It was very good, it was very easy to make, and yeah, I should eat potatoes more often. But somehow I realize now that because I have made that, to me I was finished my Libyan adventures and I haven't even watched a movie yet, but I don't think I will. Paula from Draw Your Books talked about a documentary that I was still planning on watching, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to make the time because the end of March is approaching and I have a lot of things to do. Apparently my calendar's been kind of full, more full lately. I hadn't realized it. Sorry for this vlog. If I do end up watching, I will tell you in the next Invisible Cities update. But for now, let's just say that this book is really good and that the food as well was very good. And that concludes this video about my Invisible Cities adventures. I know The Return by Hisham Matar is a well-known book, so if you've read it, I'd love to talk to you about it. And I will see you in another video. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Ba-chum, ba-chum, chum.